Digital Disruption 2014 from not so sunny San Jose. We're here this morning to share with you some of our streaming Catalyst events, Catalyst Live, as we've been able to put together a very nice facility to share the Catalyst with a much wider, broader audience. Hope you'll get some value out of this morning and be able to enjoy this with us. We use the Catalyst program to be able to validate and provide pragmatic basis for a lot of our technical specifications going forward. In particular, from the Zoom project, we've been using the Catalyst to help us determine what are the real business drivers of the virtualization of the network, and looking at how do we actually pragmatically introduce network functions virtualization into our operations environment of today. So this morning, it's my privilege to be able to introduce you to Alistair Scott, who is going to be talking to us about how to maximize the profitability of NFV. So thank you, and Alistair.
Thanks, Ken. So I'm Alistair Scott with JDSU. We're involved in a Catalyst project titled Maximizing Profitability with NFV. And really the purpose of this is really looking at how does a service provider really take on the NFV technology and then leverage it in a way that can really increase their bottom line for their business. So in our looking at this Catalyst project, our base hypothesis on this is network virtualization really provides a flexibility layer, providing agility for the business, providing two things: serviceability, the ability to launch new services and adapt services rapidly, but also affecting the operational costs, moving away from proprietary hardware and software infrastructure to a much more open and flexible framework, really affecting that cost model. One of the things that we look at, though, is that as the network becomes more programmable and more controllable in this way, generally a lot of the focus around NFV standardization has been around the technical aspects of that. What we're looking to do is to introduce the business or the financial aspects of that as well, and balance that so that both technical and financial aspects are taken. That's really the essence for this project. The way we do this, and we'll go into more detail in the following slides, we use analytics to analyze the state of the network and what the future state needs to be. And then we use that through policy and the orchestration infrastructure to then change the behavior of the network and provide a more optimal model. So what we'll be showing is the process and the state of the project as we progress through this investigation. AT&T is our project sponsor, and the companies involved in the project are JDSU, Ericsson, and Microsoft, and I'll go through each of the roles that each company is providing. So just to provide some context on where the project is at the moment. So really this project was born from some ideas and discussion back in the action week that we had in Morristown, New Jersey, back at the end of July. And we were going through various use cases, and it was clear that the business aspects of network function virtualization were not being fully addressed. There's a lot of work around interoperability and readiness, but in terms of getting the real business optimization piece, that wasn't a big enough focus. So the concept for the project was born from that idea. We're in this first phase right now with digital disruption being our readout from our first phase, where we've been working through this concept, and we've released a white paper that will be published on the TMM website, and then some recommendations for next steps. So as we move into the next phase of the project, which is really more into the actual prototyping of the solution, refining the use case and building that prototype, the work that we'll do out in Lisbon at the action week there will again further move the project along and get further input from it, and then a final demonstration of it out in the TM Forum Live event out in Nice next year. So what's different about this from normal NFV? If we consider what we might call conventional NFV orchestration, I use the term conventional in quotes because we're still building what even conventional is. But the difference being, the normal conventional network function virtualization is really focusing on two main things. The service instantiation, the ability to take a virtual function and understand what resources that virtual function is needing from the network and finding some matching resources available to be able to fulfill the requirement. So it's really a resource and requirement matching function that the infrastructure provides. So where can I run this particular function? Where do I have enough compute, storage, memory, and network capacity, for example, to run it? The other aspect of that is that we have deployment policies that guide where functions should run. So, for example, for resiliency, we may have anti-affinity policies in place so that when a network function is instantiated, it's deployed across multiple different nodes, so that if that node happens to fail or be disconnected in some way, that you don't lose the service. So there's some basic guiding policies around that deployment. So that's one aspect around service instantiation. The other aspect is the in-production part, and that's more focused around the dynamic scaling. So if that particular function runs out of its service, then what changes need to be made to that? For example, should another instance be spun up? So this elastic scaling, as we call it, to be able to grow the capacity and shrink the capacity when it's no longer required. The other aspect being if there's infrastructure maintenance that's needed, the ability to transition a service from one, or a function from one node to another, so that node can be taken out for service, for example. So that's kind of defines some of the key aspects of conventional network function virtualization. This catalyst is then taking that a step further, really looking at how can we bring dynamic policy into that and bring then these other business aspects into a more real-time approach so that that policy can be adapted in real time and then change the behavior of the service in such a way that the business profitability can be optimized. So there's three key steps to how this is achieved at a very high level, and we'll go into a little more detail in the next slides. But first of all, we collect data. And this data is a combination of those items that are cost drivers, and we'll go through them in more detail, and technical metrics like load, utilization, resource availability, available capacity, for example. That data is then brought through both aggregated and threshold, but also doing some trending and some forward predicting on the velocity of that data, how it's changing over time. And as part of our analytics step, then we need to look at how the various options are going to be used to basically pick what is the optimal model to take that data, figure out what changes should be made to the deployment of the network, and then having selected a particular optimal reconfiguration, using the normal orchestration mechanisms to move or redeploy or redeploy or scaling. So the act on the right-hand side is really using normal NFV orchestration techniques. So on the goals in this detail, essentially the data we're using is the new items that we're bringing in the picture here, in addition to the technical metrics, what the business are some of these cost drivers shown in the top right corner here. So for example, cost to compute on the page certain infrastructure, maybe it's for some of the compute resources or their own sense at least at the infrastructure level, and you see if you have higher per cost, where we tend to bias your compute if you have capacity or things you need. Storage, similarly, at least storage will see increases. Storage capability. Network, so network bandwidth, maybe most of the boards are there, traffic service, running among locations, trans multiple networks, and versus keeping that local. The power communication, so different data centers, for example, have the power sources. From time to time, peak loads, the cost of power change. Software licensing, for example, the number of instances that the particular network functions are running currently on the network will drive costs. And the last here for SLA penalties, for example, the service policies that you know you're going to violate service threshold, let's say at the end of the month, then taking proactive changes to the network in such a way that you can restore quality quality or service quality and mitigate that penalty. So these are some of the cost drivers that normally wouldn't really have been a key factor in determining NFV location. So going through the use case sequence for the project, we start on the left-hand side here. We've got the data sources, the data collection and mediation role. And this is really bringing in the data from the network itself, data centers, both from a software and hardware level, from infrastructure and the running software instances, and also some of the orchestration environment as well. So that's really bringing in the kind of data set that we're going to work through. So that data is collected at some level of aggregation, thresholding, and trending on that. And then the key metrics, both from a quality of service and business metrics, are fed through up into the analytics layer. And that's where we do the analysis on this to start determining should changes to the current status be made, and if so, which ones of those are the optimal changes to select. The actual changes are then invoked through policy by establishing a new dynamic set of policy rules. So following the analytics, updating the policy for the current set. And once that new policy is established, or the additional policy constraints are established, then that triggers up into the service orchestration layer, such that that can then be instantiated or update the running instances. So that may involve either moving an active function from one location to another, it may involve scaling a particular function, or it may just apply for new instances of that network function, deploying them on a new node versus where they would have traditionally been without new policy in place. So some of the workflow on this left-hand side, there's a number of workflows that we've been looking at as use cases. One, for example, here is where you'd have a catalog-based service item that's instantiated, and then we find that as it runs, let's say the cost for some reason actually increases. So that maybe the power of that data center goes to a different cost profile. So that triggers our policy based on that change, and then a new policy is added, and then with the optimization we figure out where should that network function be deployed, a new data center identified, and then finally through orchestration that DNF is actually moved from one location to the other. So you can see here this flow using this business change as a driver to essentially move us from original state to new state to optimize that cost. If we look at the participants' roles in the project, so JDSU's fulfilling the data collection mediation part. We're working with Ericsson to feed the data into their analytics engine and policy engine using their catalog system and initial service orchestration. And then Microsoft is providing with their Azure platform the base infrastructure that's going to be supporting the runtime of the virtual network functions. I think as we go forward, AT&T obviously is our champion. We'll be working with them to identify key use cases that are pertinent for specific deployment scenarios. Maybe it's not data center to data center, maybe it's more data center to edge to customer prem, as we look at virtualizing CPE, virtualizing network edge, for example. So there's a number of other dimensions that we'll start to bring into this in the next phase of the project. I think it'll make it a very exciting demonstration. So where does this project head? Well, the real goal of this is just to identify in this more dynamic model with this level of control, what are the kind of challenge points to us? Where's the technology missing? What proof points do we need to establish through the concept? So one of the first ones that we look at here is understanding what data we actually want to bring in. What are the key cost drivers and metrics that you actually want to track? Which ones might change from time to time, in real time versus they're just standard base cost drivers. So drilling further into that and starting to make some recommendations around how those cost factors should be measured and tracked, and then built into the optimization. The second one is looking at the actual information models and policy schemas that support this. One of the key facts that we have to maintain is that all of the components in the system, whether it's the runtime orchestration components, the current inventory or status of the network, where we're gathering the metrics from, the analytics, all need to have a consistent and common view of the data elements that we're referring to. So, for example, if we're collecting data from a virtual link and looking at its capacity, we need to have a means of referring to that and tracing that back to the services that it's supporting, the same way as the orchestrator has that same view of the coupling. So we need this shared and consistent model of that information across. So a lot of dependency around the information modeling in there. And so that's a new area, definitely a challenge for the project to progress that. Because that's not really present or mature yet in the NFV world. As we look at the analytics algorithms, moving from a world where a lot of network change and optimization is really more reactionary, so more of a break-fix model or degraded service and improvement model, trying to get to a point where you're looking at the trending and forward trending using more predictive algorithms to essentially get ahead of that curve so the changes can be planned and made before service is degraded and hopefully before service quality is actually impacted. And then the other last item here is just in terms of the general partitioning of roles with the various groups working in the NFV space and standards still emerging, a lot of implementations both open source and vendor specific being deployed. There's a lot of partitioning and functionality that needs to occur and sharing data across these various components. So the next one we want to really start to do is to clarify what roles each of these stages, which of them need to be tightly coupled, which of them can be more loosely integrated from an information flow point of view and also from a real-time data flow point of view. So there's a number of areas there that we're looking to really provide some good output from the Catalyst and influence the direction of those standards and really help move the industry forward. I mean, this project in general is really about making a difference to the business and fundamentally the motivation for network function virtualization, that service stability, that operational cost improvement. This Catalyst is really trying to work out how do we optimize that cost in real time using the flexibility that we have. So with that, that's the last slide. Welcome any questions.
Okay, Alistair, one question that came to mind was, what would you say is the number one takeaway from this Catalyst experience? What did, was there something that really stood out?
Yeah, I think it's what we've seen from the digital disruption event this week, a lot of interest in the project. I think that the concept of it has really resonated well with a lot of, particularly the service providers that have been reviewing with us this week. So that's been very encouraging. That we've, I think, got a lot of endorsement that this is really tackling an important business factor for us. I think the other aspect that everyone's aware of, maybe slightly concerned of, is as we look to a more automated infrastructure, at what point do we take the human out of the loop and allow the network to become this kind of self-optimizing on a grander scale infrastructure? And so I think that's another aspect that we need to look at. At what point do we trust the self-driving power of the network to actually go ahead and navigate itself? I think one of the interesting things with this project is that we still have the ability to keep the human in the loop, the data gathering, the analytics and optimization, and the updated policy. We can still essentially have a human oversight of that before that goes in and influences orchestration. So I think those are probably the two key takeaways. It's just the business value is definitely a key item that very definitely a lot of interest in delivering on that, and then to what degree we're going to allow this automation until we're confident that it's stable and safe step to take.
Excellent. Now, you'd alluded to the fact that you've got a next phase plan.
Yes.
What kind of things should we expect to see at TM Forum Live in June?
Right. So at the moment, the project is a concept level. So we've been looking at our various software products across the various companies involved and the use case with AT&T. But it's been very much a paper study exercise, working through just logically how would we combine these, what roles would they take on. So definitely as we move into refining on that use case and digging into more detail with actual prototype implementation. So looking ahead to Nice, what we'll have is a live demonstration of that end-to-end model where we'll take data input, aggregate, process that, analyze it, update policy, and then make some changes at the orchestration level. So that's the goal, is that we'll show that as a full running prototype of the project at that point. I suspect there may be other follow-on work from that point, but right now that's our horizon, is for that event to work on an end-to-end prototype.
Excellent. If any of the listeners or viewers of this were interested in getting involved, how would they do that?
Yeah, definitely. Contacting us through the TM forum. We certainly welcome other players and service providers to get involved as well. I think that would be welcome to as we move into this next phase. We're still formulating the exact construct for the prototype work, so we're still somewhat open to inputs on that. Certainly, service provider sponsorship. We have AT&T who are providing very good direction for us, but it's it'd be interesting as well to see maybe another service provider look for commonality or maybe a slightly broader viewpoint.
Okay. Oftentimes business optimization is very company specific. How are you starting to see patterns, however, that are going to be reusable across businesses? And
I think at an NFV level, I suspect some of the policies will be quite common in terms of location, for a given service type, how close to an end customer is located if they have edge data center, for example. So, for example, a content delivery network, there's going to be a natural evolution towards hosting that on NFV nodes towards the edge of the network. So I think there'll be some consistent themes that provide that cost optimization to really use those assets well. Then I think it's going to vary a lot by the service type and the service bundles that are being used. One of the things that's interesting is just because you see a suboptimal state doesn't necessarily mean that you need to fix it. And so I think, as well as identifying possible better options, we also need to consider are they all better options than the current state? And it may actually be that you actually suppress changes to policy, for example, because you don't want to have any service disruption while the service is migrated or removed. So I think that's another factor that we need to kind of attenuate the automation with these loops, just so that trigger excessive churn in the configuration of the network as well. Because every time you change something, there's some element of risk that something will move that was unexpected, triggers on other effects. But I think what this really does provide is a basis, at least for the initial instantiation of the service, definitely some cost drivers to help guide that, and also the mechanism to be able to move items and optimize in real time if factors change that cause that. So I think it's the initial instantiation of the service, looking at those cost factors will be that's probably a fairly low risk item. The dynamic changes, I think, are the one that will be the one that we have to take more care of.
Okay. Policy and orchestration are some of the biggest concerns with the implementation of NFV. Just wondered what your thoughts were on and experiences were with working with that, and how important do you think that is to realize virtualization?
Yeah, definitely policy and orchestration, absolutely, two of the key items that really make this possible. I think the big debate that I see is how tight the policy and orchestration need to be coupled together. In particular, if there's going to be multiple orchestration domains, do you have a single policy domain covering multiple orchestration domains, or do you have multiple policy domains that are allocated to each orchestration domain? It's fairly clear we're not going to have one mega orchestrator covering the whole network end to end, and therefore, how those two partition out across a large network infrastructure covering different network types, different service types. I think that's going to be a key evolving theme, not just for this project, but I think in the NFV domain overall. That's an area to evolve.
Yes, that's very consistent with what the Zoom team has been discussing. Recognizing that the multi-administration, the hybrid coordination is going to be a key issue.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to know what your plans are as far as feeding back the practical results of this into the Zoom project.
Yeah, so I think, obviously with the live demonstration, and that's, we'll have that work with group time. I expect prior to that, certainly for the action week out in Lisbon, that we'll have some further work coming from our recommendations that we already have and the plans. So I think that'll be a good opportunity to read out and maybe share that in a broader forum and maybe have some of those items worked through as part of that action week as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Alistair. It's been very interesting, and good luck on your next phase.
Thank you very much.